Welcome everybody to the Hirewell Recruiting Insights podcast, also Zoom webinar, also LinkedIn Live. I'm your host, James Hornick, partner at Hirewell. Today, we're going to talk about job seeking for new grads in the COVID economy. Joining me is the Associate Director of Employment Engagement and Partnerships for the Career Center at DePaul University, Adam Cook.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat today.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I guess first off, I want to make sure we can kind of lay things up for everyone here. So do you want to maybe give everyone a quick intro on your background so they kind of know what your background is and what you do and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, for sure. So I started my career in higher education in California. So I'm from Chicago in the northwest suburbs. And I moved out to Southern California. So I got my professional start out there in a number of different areas in higher education. I was a program director. I managed some of our global partnerships there. And then after I left higher education, I went into a number of different things. I got recruited to play volleyball in college. So I coached for a little while, worked in a couple of gyms doing different random things and personal training. And then when I moved back to Chicago with my wife, I actually got started in technology. So I started helping teams, startup technology companies build their sales and onboarding team. So, the whole thing from hiring practices to how we onboard people internally, sales scripts and building culture and stuff like that. And through that process is actually how I got connected to DePaul. I got connected first as an employer. I was looking for some interns and some entry level hires and had some feedback on their process. And they called me a couple months later and said, hey, we've got a position that might be a good fit for you with external partnerships. Are you interested? So that's how I got started at DePaul. I love it. It's a great organization. They're doing really innovative things in the higher ed space. And so that's where we're at now.
Yeah, so it's part of the reason why I was excited to talk with you is because you have you had a pretty varied background. You've had different life experiences and different kind of business experiences, which I think, is valuable in general. I think having, kind of different things to pull from. And kind of the focus of today's conversation is like, it's obviously a weird time in general. It's a weird time for the country. It's a weird time to be in business. And, kind of our space at Hirewell, we are in the business of helping people, helping companies hire. And then we also recently launched Hirewell, which is, I should say pre-launch, but we're in the business of helping people become better job seekers and whatnot. So getting people to work is kind of in our DNA. It's a tough time to get to work right now. So, and I think it's got to be especially tough for, kind of entry level job seekers. And I know that's ultimately what your experience is right now, kind of with DePaul. What do you see in the market right now for new grads? Like how would you kind of define like the current situation and what are you seeing at DePaul?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as everywhere else, right? Especially when you're looking at entry level or new talent, there's always a little bit of uncertainty when you're kind of taking a gamble on new hires and some untried experience. But it's not all bad news. We're seeing a lot of companies who are standing behind their internship offers, standing behind their full-time offers to new grads, which is great. And like any labor market, the top talent, the top 10%, they're always going to find a place to land, right? And so that's what we're really trying to focus on at DePaul is, hey, we believe we have some of the best talent in the area. And so how do we get them connected to the right companies? And particularly in technical roles, I'm sure we'll talk about this much later, but anything in technology, we haven't seen much change there. Finance really hasn't seen much change. But I think the message that's really important for new grads and companies alike is, hey, this is different. This is a little bit unprecedented, or at least a major departure from what you anticipated the job market going into. So from both ends, employer and students both, let's be flexible. Let's really take a look at what our hard and soft skills are, and make sure that we're giving the right message and kind of putting our employer brand out there, or employee brand out there the best way that we can.
Let's in terms of companies right now, I don't know how much you can get into it, but like what organizations are you seeing that are hiring, or industries? Like I'm sure, I guess if you want to compare and contrast, like I don't. What places do you guys normally partner with? What places are still moving forward and seem to be doing pretty strong right now in terms of doing that hiring?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're fortunate at DePaul where we've got great connection to the city of Chicago. We've been around for a long time, obviously being an urban campus. We're right there in the heart of it. And so we partner a lot with financial services and public accounting in particular.
Mhm.
And they still have continued to be a huge partner for us. And as you can imagine, huge companies like that, they're kind of ready for the shift from
Mhm.
in-person work and internships to being remote. And so that's a huge place. Fortunately, most of our students or a lot of our students are in that space. That's a big draw here at DePaul. That's a huge partnership for us. Healthcare and science is another big one, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
that we're seeing. The other two that are really interesting, again, we talked about technology. Again, you've got network security, informational systems, that whole technology space, regardless of upper level or entry level. There's still a huge amount of openings there.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting at DePaul specifically is we're a really well-known film school. And
Mhm.
so that's one area that, as you can imagine, the entertainment industry has seen a lot of constriction. And so that's where we've got a team that's focusing pretty heavy on, hey, how do we pivot? How do we ensure that we're still keeping career readiness at the forefront and keeping the momentum going as you enter into a super constricted market. So it just depends on the industry you go into, but fortunately, a lot of the places we're connected are still pretty. They're still moving forward pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean that definitely matches up with kind of what we've seen, and I kind of want to give some perspective too, because we kind of function on all levels. So we work in executive levels. We do kind of entry level hiring and working with our clients. So by industry, I mean it's probably a lot of the stuff you'd expect. So tech is doing great. A lot of startup firms, especially the ones that have already gotten their funding and whatnot.
Yep.
Finance and trading, it's an area where we have a lot of play in. Then all of a sudden, then there's your recession proof industries, food production, things like that.
Yeah.
Positions are interesting though, because as you said, like tech's a no-brainer that's doing the best.
Yeah.
And so I want to riff on that for a second too, but I wanted to, before I kind of go deeper on that, sales roles. We've actually seen a lot of sales
Yeah.
roles.
So that
And yeah, so I wanted to talk about that too, because it's a different path that I think maybe some people may not have thought of as something they want to get into, but I think if in the world of business, it might be the best way to kind of get your career started. So I think that I remember when I was in school, I was a marketing student, and I went to school with finance students and people in other areas, and like at the time, it's like I don't know if it was a generational thing or not. Everyone kind of panned sales. You know what I mean? It was like, why I didn't went to school for something like sales seems like such a, but it's not until like you get out of school you realize that like sales is the area that's like most connected to, like that's your client facing, it's like the most important role.
Yeah.
And maybe aside from the people who are creating whatever product, but in terms of actually understanding what your customers do and what their feedback is, what their interface is, and it's those types of skills that are invaluable in your career, that even if it's not where you thought you were going to start, it's for a lot of people a better start, you know what I mean? Because you can get into other areas in terms of, customer success and, other kind of more functional areas, having that type of background. But have you seen a lot of that? Like, I guess in your end is maybe some of the students getting into or evaluating sales roles, which they didn't think that's something they'd look at.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. It's not something that people, at least the majority of people, when you're a kid and you're talking about what do you want to be when you grow up, you don't really picture being a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense, but it's a bit unfortunate because, like you said, it's the lifeblood of a lot of organizations, and you
Mm-hmm.
learn so much going through that pathway.
Yeah.
Just as an example, if you look at the sports industry, major franchises, you almost can't get anywhere in those organizations without going through ticket sales or being an account manager, because they understand, look, this is where you're at the forefront of our customers. You understand their needs. You understand our business proposition, our value proposition in our market. And so that's kind of that hidden industry that's seeing a lot of open positions right now. Sales managers, sales engineers, even. And it is a great place to start your career in any industry. You learn a lot of soft skills that will prepare you for your future career. You know, being able to handle rejection, being able to navigate a conversation in a way where you're still keeping the priorities at the forefront of the conversation, but building rapport and expanding your network and ensuring that you've got some of that social sale working for you as well. So yeah, that is another kind of underlying or sleeping industry that is seeing a lot of growth. And we are seeing and encouraging students as well. Hey, you know, if you want to go into whatever it is, this could be a great place to start. And, you know, reminding people the same thing in 2008, like where you start isn't going to be where you end up. So
I think that's the key thing too, is I think when I was in school too, a lot of the people I went to school with, like they had an idea of like, this is where I want to be. So I have to start there in that same path, and realize that doesn't really work that way, you know, and sales is one great area where you can pivot to pretty much any place from that section. The other, so we were talking about technology, and that's another thing too that is kind of interesting, because I think when people think technology, they think, okay, but I didn't go to school for software development, you know what I mean? I didn't, and whatnot. But there's as you kind of mentioned, there's so many other areas and skill sets kind of within technology. You know, your business analyst, your project managers, your more functional related kind of technology skill sets, you know, that are also, you know, that's, you know, no one, I don't, you know, the joke is that like no one went to school to be a recruiter, you know what I mean? But did anyone go to school to be a project manager either? You know what I mean? It's like, it's another, you know, or a tech PM, like probably not, you know? And I think that's another kind of thing where there's a high demand for it. It sets you up to go in a lot of different ways, you know, when you're talking more functional related kind of tech skill sets. And it's something that you could do as an entry-level grad, you know what I mean? Or even if you had an unrelated major. So
yeah, and understanding too, like, you know, thinking about the long-term arc of your career, you know, there's opportunities for product management down the road where maybe you need a bit of a technical background to understand, you know, some of the architecture behind a product, but you're really just kind of, you know, scheduling and managing teams. And then, you know, there's that whole area of success and support roles as well. So yeah, technology is a really interesting space. And this is another conversation that we're having with employers and students alike, is this whole scenario, this whole situation, really, I think has pulled the veil back on a lot of some of these technology needs, where if you're not in the tech space as an employer, you're finding really quickly, I have to be at least technologically literate if I want to get my message out there. I have to either be capable of or hire somebody to do digital marketing, to answer emails in a professional and timely way that, you know, speaks in this digital kind of environment that we're in right now. And so beyond just working for a technology company or in the technology industry, gaining some of those technical skills is going to be incredibly valuable moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of getting, so one thing I want to talk about is like specific advice you have for new grads, right? So we kind of, I think we're kind of getting into it right now already, but like, if someone, why don't we go back to, you mentioned film, right? So that was one of the areas where you guys have a lot of students. What's your advice to people in that sector or any other kind of sectors that, you know, if someone had their heart set on something, what are you telling them, and what all the things are the students doing?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll answer just from like what we give it in terms of general advice, and then we can go into maybe some specifics. But the first thing is kind of this like 3-step, you know, self-evaluation of reflect on, okay, if my sector, my area, or my industry isn't really hiring right now, I need to reflect on, is this going to be something or an industry or an area that's going to be going to recover, going to be viable in the future? Or do I need to kind of take this opportunity to be like, okay, maybe I need to reevaluate what I really want to pursue in my career? The second is reprioritize, right? So along that same self-reflection, or in that same self-reflection vein, reprioritize, you know, how important is the benefits at a company to you? How important is starting salary to you? How important is, you know, all of these things that you had kind of put into your brain as either deal breakers or the most important things? Are they still the most important now that we're in a completely different situation? And then the next thing is, you know, remember, it won't be forever, right? So some of those things may change, some of them may not, and it's going to be a rocky road for a couple years, but it won't be forever. And so if you're okay kind of navigating some of those rocky roads for the next couple years, or you have the support network around you, then great, good for you. Then, we encourage people to network and expand your network if you're not able to go into a job right after graduation. And we encourage people to look at some of those loose time networks as well. This is a great opportunity to reach out to people maybe you used to be connected with, but aren't anymore. These kind of unprecedented is the buzzword right now, times, allow an opportunity to reconnect with people and expand your professional network. We also encourage people to upskill a lot. One of the great things about technology and all these tools that were in place well before this is it's kind of created a lot of trainings that are open source, right? We look at tools like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning is a great one. So if you're having a hard time finding a role in your industry, don't just kind of sit back and be like, well, just, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. We already mentioned this, but the reality is that top talent is always going to get hired. So how do you find a way to transition or to, move yourself into that top talent tier? And upskilling is one of them. Get a certification on LinkedIn on, hey, I know how to, whatever it may be, run Premiere Cut Pro, if that's something that you haven't really had a skill in before. I've done a digital marketing class. I understand some of the broader concepts here. So, that's a really great opportunity with some of the newfound, free time. And then the next thing is, or the last thing really is we encourage people to keep their professional momentum, right? It's always difficult to get something started from zero. And so even if it's remote volunteering, even if it's, doing some of those upskilling classes, even if it's reaching out to people doing informational interviews, keep moving forward at least a little bit, because if you get stuck and stopped, it's going to be really, really difficult to move forward.
I think, have you seen, what was I going to say? I have kind of a couple takeaways for like my parting thoughts on advice to new grads, but is there anything from an interviewing standpoint that you're seeing right now, or anything from a more of a tactical, what students need to be doing better now versus maybe a few months ago, or what they need to be doing differently?
Yeah. I honestly don't, I don't think there's too much that's changed from the interview standpoint outside of, if you've had an offer get pushed back or rescinded, it's okay to mention that in the interview process, because at some point you expressed or displayed the skills and the characteristics that were necessary to land that offer. And so it's okay to, in an interview, have that conversation and bring that up and say, yeah, I'm looking for new opportunities because I lost this opportunity, but here's what I've learned through the process. So being able to tell that narrative, I think is really important in terms of a new skill. But the reality is a lot of interviews and this whole recruiting process turning virtual really isn't as much of an adjustment for the new grads as it is for companies a lot of times. I mean, when you just think about, generational skills and being a digital native, doing an interview over a video screen really isn't that much of a departure from the rest of, their social interactions. So we're finding that the practicing of the skills, it's a pretty easy transition for new grads that are going into this virtual recruiting world.
One thing I want to add that I noticed that I think it's a generational thing, or just like a lot of students haven't really gotten into LinkedIn yet, right? It's something you do kind of once you become a professional at some point. They're probably still in the mode where and there's people who are further along in their career that use other forms of social media, but it's typically the thing that people don't start using until they're kind of a little bit established in their career. One thing I have, the young people who are in school or just out of school who have really gone all in and they ask for advice, they talk with people, being younger and getting their career start as part of their story. I've seen more positive feedback for those types of people. And, it's more senior people bending over backwards to help people
Yes.
like that
Yeah.
than like anywhere else. And the thing is, I don't see it that often. And I think that's probably why it works. But there's a handful of examples of like, there was someone I started following last year. He was like doing a daily vlog on his summer internship. And I'm like, this
Yeah.
is fascinating content. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
anyone else who's like 20 years old in school,
Yeah.
but I mean, he had like a bonkers engagement on like every single post he made. And I know
Yeah.
he made a lot of kind of connections on it. And I'd also seen, but like, I'd say this too, like I actually talked with a few people that in our office and anywhere else that, anyone we've known who's just out of school or in school and come to us asking for advice, people just go like, I like to think most people pay it forward, right? If someone
Yeah.
asks me for help, I'm always going to respond. I'm always going to answer. But when someone junior does that, like even I'll go twice as hard to kind of help in any way that I
Yeah.
can. And I don't know why, but it's kind of universal. But I think it's something that people who are still in school should realize that get involved in LinkedIn. People who are established in their careers want to help you. They love people who are proactive and aggressive. It's a kind of like maturity slash aggressiveness that I think is well received. And play around with it, have fun with it, post a lot, contact people directly, ask for advice. People at companies that you might want to work with in the industry, you'd be amazed how many people kind of get back to you and actually will genuinely help you out. So
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, right? Because you're demonstrating the skills that anybody would want to have as a part of their organization.
yeah,
You're demonstrating some initiative, you're demonstrating some courage, because the reality is to cold message somebody, despite the anonymity of being online, it's not necessarily that way in LinkedIn, because your entire
yeah.
professional life is attached to that. So, to get the courage to cold message somebody and say, hey, I'd love your help or whatever. Those are all characteristics of anybody who wants to build an all-star team is like, yeah, I want a person like that. And I think we all remember too, when we were just getting started out and, needing to have help. And so, yeah, it makes sense that people are wanting to give back. And we give that advice to people a lot as well. Everybody's at home, right? So where maybe when you would reach out to somebody and they'd be, commuting or traveling for business or, in a meeting here and then jumping around there, everybody's at home at their computer. So you've got this almost guaranteed, like, they may not respond, they may not see it right away, but I know they're sitting there.
Yeah. Everybody's got roughly an hour more time than they did before. And
Yeah.
they don't have anybody coming by their desk, like sucking them into meetings. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you on that one 100%.
Yeah.
I would say this, so I want to kind of pivot and talk about companies for a second too, but like, I guess the kind of takeaways are, I would mention too is, again, if you're a student or a new grad and, you're in the areas you want to look at are technology and sales. So there's a lot of roles in technology that you don't have to be a true coder for, a true technologist for, and sales can be, I still maintain it's an invaluable skill in your career, even if you pivot out of it. And if it's not something you're planning on, what I would focus on is like what companies are doing things that interest you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? What companies truly, it could be in any industry. Like, what do you feel passionate about? What places are doing well? Selling those products should be something that, inherently you have some interest in. So
Yeah.
anyways.
And I'll add to that I was 100% in that vein of like, I'm not going to be a salesperson. I don't want to be a salesperson.
Yeah.
And end up being a salesperson and training sales team. So if you're still stuck or having a hard time wrapping your mind around that, reach out to me. I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit too, because I want to talk a little bit on the company side, because there's a lot of organizations that are kind of in, there's a lot of places that they want to hire, they want to push forward their plans. They're just not sure if they can. And maybe we should step back before we get into that. Maybe we should talk about in general, normal times, right? So in a normal situation, there's some companies that struggle in hiring junior people because it's a different profile than they typically are used to hiring for. So what advice do you give companies, I guess, when companies are trying to make themselves more attractive to recent grads or that younger demographic in terms of hiring? What can they do to I guess, get better at it, I guess?
Yeah, the first thing, and this is another thing that I'm really proud to be a part of DePaul's organization. This generation that's coming into the workforce is the most diverse generation entering the workforce that we've seen. And so the first thing that I would encourage and that we do encourage employers to take a look at is, what are your diversity and inclusion initiatives look like, right? Because this is the top talent that you're wanting to recruit is going to be diverse. They're going to have a lot of different skill sets, and they're going to be able to add a lot to your organization. But if you haven't taken the time to look at, hey, how are we as an organization? Do we value different backgrounds? Do we value diversity here? If you don't, or if you just kind of pay lip service to it, new grads, they're going to be able to see through that right away. And so being able to take a look at that seriously, evaluate where your organization is at, is a huge step in the right direction in ensuring that you attract top talent. And that's, similar to what you're talking about, of being able to bridge that gap of expectations. So if you're used to hiring, senior level or mid-level employees, people with 3-5 years experience or whatever, and now you're looking for 0 to 1 year, your expectations of their incoming professionalism needs to adjust. You don't need to lower, where you want them to be, but where you expect them to be during the interview process needs to adjust a little bit. So that's the first thing. Second thing is understand as well what your value proposition is. We just had this massive shift in our economy and our labor market. So obviously COVID-19 aside, when we're looking at just generalities, it's competitive out there, and there's a lot of companies who are investing a lot of time and money and energy and internal talent to ensuring that their workplace is a place where people want to be. And so not everybody needs to be a Google with beanbag chairs and foosball tables and everything. If that's not your culture and that's not your company, that's fine. But do take a hard look at what can I offer to make myself a competitive place to work. We've said that, kind of recruitment has shifted from recruiting to almost being marketing, right? Where you've got to put yourself out there, control your brand, and be a place where new grads want to be. And ultimately, that's an investment in the future of your company, because if you're a place where young professionals want to be, hopefully you're a place where young professionals will want to stay and continue to grow their career there as well. So being able to, to leverage your benefits, kind of redefining that professionalism internally, and being able to bridge that gap of your expectations are some really important things.
Yeah, I don't want to get totally sidetracked. We could easily turn this into like an employer brand discussion,
Yeah.
which is something I've had kind of multiple times on our podcast. But it's interesting just that one thing I love about the Gen Z is like it's a more socially minded generation, I think, and it's really forcing companies to be the real deal, and which I think is a great thing. And I think a lot of companies might. There are some companies that are doing great things. For them, it's just a matter of articulating that message better, which I guess is the better problem to have. So, but I think you kind of mentioned it too, is that like recruiting needs to become more of a marketing function, as opposed, and really kind of making sure that people just kind of understand the value that companies have, as you said. But I digress. Let's get back to the more COVID related stuff. Let's take it back to this particular market. Like, what advice are you giving companies? I know there's some places where they want to hire, they don't know if they can, or they don't know if they can, what their timeframes are. Everyone's just on shaky ground, and it's no fault of the companies. There's a lot of places that are just kind of in a position where they wish they could push forward. They don't want to rescind offers. They don't want to pull back. But, at the end of the day, that's where they might be financially. What I guess are you saying what advice we have for companies like that in kind of dealing with this particular market?
Yeah, it's tough because, and I'll give the caveat before I say this, we will encourage people, in a certain direction. And we do it because we believe it's right. And we believe that this will be really valuable to you. But, any advice that I give is always, look, if hiring somebody is going to put you under, don't do it, right? Like, you still need to run a smart business. But that being said, we look at 2008 for a lot of advice and a lot of trends because it was similar, right? It came a little bit out of nowhere. It took a number of years to recover. And so when we look at what successful companies did in that time, or what companies who maybe were large companies, and they're fine, but what big mistakes they had. The first thing is, we always encourage people, look, maintain a presence on campus, even if that's virtual, right? We talk about this with the professional momentum, on the new grad side. It's the same thing on the employer side. If you completely cut off your recruiting efforts, when stuff inevitably opens back up, you're going to have a really, really tough time generating that momentum again. And the great thing is, especially with virtual options, they don't have to cost a lot, right? You can do virtual networking events, you can do virtual informational sessions, and just be a person or be an organization that's out there having conversations with students. The other thing that I encourage people to do is virtual site visits. And I don't know a career services department anywhere that if an organization reached out and was like, hey, we'd love to do a virtual tour for your students of our place, so that, when we get back to where we can make offers or whatever it may be, people are a little bit more familiar with who we are, what we're about in our space. I mean, that's great. And it's not going to cost you anything. So maintaining a virtual presence is super important. But in terms of like value proposition, you have to be thinking, when this does open up again, if we look back to 2008, in 2011, the companies that maintained that momentum were able to attract that top talent right away.
Yeah.
And again, we go back to the same thing we talked before. Top talent is going to get hired regardless of the industry. It doesn't matter if you're in film, if you're in, food service, retail, wherever. If the top talent, or the top talent will go somewhere. So you have to ask yourself, am I in a position to be able to pursue that or not?
Yeah.
But if you're not right now, when things do open up, that is going to happen really, really quickly. And so it's important to position yourself for the future and being ready to capitalize on that. And that means, still prioritizing your talent acquisition team. I'm not sure if you're familiar with NACE, but NACE is an organization that looks a lot at college campuses and employers, and they do a regular poll. And their most recent one from last week said that 66% of companies are maintaining their same talent acquisition teams. Another 23% are scaling back a little bit, and somewhere close to, maybe 7 or 8% cut their talent acquisition teams. Well, again, if we look at 2008, that 7 or 8% they're going to have a really hard time being prepared for the future when things start to open up again. So think about the future. The next thing that we tell people, look, if you can't hire right now, we're in an environment where virtual and digital solutions, they're going to stick around. We know, you've seen this a ton at your organization. This isn't a surprise. The timeline of having to go digital and virtual as heavily as we have maybe was accelerated, but this virtual recruiting, implementing Zoom and video meetings and webinars and stuff, that was coming down the pipeline regardless. At DePaul, we see a lot of the public accounting firms in the last 2 or 3 years, they've moved to virtual interviewing. They've started to shift that way. And so if you're not in a position to shift right now, or you're a little bit nervous about hiring, I would say use this time to kind of refresh or rethink some of your processes and some of your operations. Where do you need more, maybe digital marketing, maybe technology skills, maybe somebody in some of these kind of tech-focused roles? This is a great opportunity to pivot a little bit and be ready for what the next normal of your business is. So those are some of the main things, but that's a conversation we try to have as gently, but also as candidly as possible of, hey, maybe this is the time to shift what your normal operations and processes might look like.
Yeah, you hit on several interesting points there, and I didn't want to cut you off at any point, but there are a few things we got to go deeper on even. So, what I really like the idea of like, if you don't just shut down, like if you're doing a lot with career fairs and whatnot, there's so many new innovative things that, I mean, not even things I'm gonna be able to think of off the top of my head right now, but ways you can engage with people digitally. And as long as you're putting that energy in towards some other avenue, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're not already using Instagram or TikTok or some other like social network, or,
Yeah.
you know, doing a Zoom webinar series, or creating a Facebook community group or something like that, or some other way of kind of engaging people. And then as things kind of normalize, kind of keep those extra channels going, because everyone who
Definitely.
didn't spend their time doing that, you have that much more of a leg up, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot, because I think that's what, I mean, ultimately that's what companies are doing. That's why we're doing this via Zoom instead of in person right now. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you have people adapt, but I look at it as another thing to add to your kind of tool set, you know, as this goes on. I think that, and you were kind of talking about, you know, I had different thoughts on what to. I think if for some reason you aren't sure if you're able to hire, I think we're in a phase where you can be transparent about that, about your genuine interest in bringing somebody on board, and being transparent with kind of where you are with the economy and everything else. And I think that's something a lot of companies aren't necessarily like comfortable with. You know what I mean? Because you and I have been recruiting for a long time. We know that a lot of companies are not that great at feedback. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Staying in touch. But now is a great time, because people understand that, you know, if you have a point person, if you have a pool of candidates or several people you want to bring on board, you know, your timeline is a little sketchy, you're waiting to see where things happen, just having honest conversations with them and having someone stay in touch, you
Yes.
know, because and it doesn't have to be the HR person or the recruiter. It can be actually be the hiring manager or someone else kind of involved that actually is, you know, involved in this hire. Let them know that this is genuine interest. This is not just lip service, because I
Yeah.
guarantee there's other companies out there who are just going to kind of ghost and kind of go silent.
Yep.
And, you know, it's these candidates might go somewhere else in the meantime. You don't know, but, you know, at least you set yourself up from a standpoint of, as things turn around, you've got people, you know, in your back pocket, so to speak, that you've treated well, that have a high level of respect for you because of how you've kind of communicated openly, versus companies who haven't. And
Yeah.
even in worst case scenario, at least that story gets out, you know, like these
Yeah.
people talk to other people and they're like, hey, this is a good organization. They did right by me, and they were transparent. So
Yeah. And who's to say, and this is another conversation we have depending on the organization and the industry, but okay, so maybe you're not ready to hire somebody full time right now. Why can't you shift and offer some project based work,
yeah.
right? Why
Hmm.
can't you shift and if it was going to be a full time internship or a 12-week internship, make it a micro internship, because I guarantee you that there are things that, like you just mentioned, we need somebody to spin up our digital presence quickly, and we need somebody who's got that skill set and understands a little bit of that environment. Well, great. That's an awesome opportunity, again, that helps build your employer brand. You're doing right by somebody. You know, the other thing is there's a great opportunity virtually for some rotational programs, right?
Hmm.
You've got fantastic, regardless of where your employees are. We see this a lot in the accounting firms. Again, you know, they've got offices all over the nation, and leadership is in completely different areas. Well, maybe you shift from, again, a full-time hire to more of a project or rotational based opportunity, where now you've got a new hire or a new grad who's starting to get to know your organization, and they get to kind of rotate around and spend some time with different people in different areas, where maybe the physical space or the geographical location wouldn't allow that to happen. So there's a lot of really creative things that you can do. Again, just to reiterate what you said, to, you know, take care of your people, elevate that employer brand, and make sure that you're keeping your momentum moving forward.
I think we covered a lot here. Is there anything else you want to get into? Or I don't know if there's any other like parting words or parting advice you had either for students or companies or anything else?
Yeah, you know, the thing that we talk about a lot is, and you guys say this, I've heard you say this, is you got to go where the jobs are, right?
Hmm.
And I think with technology, and particularly in this time with everything being super compressed, you know, the lines are getting blurred a lot on where these jobs are. I'll just say with technology in particular. And for students, my advice would be, you know, if you don't have any technical skills that you can put on a resume that you can have a conversation with somebody, I would strongly encourage you to get some. whether it be through, again, Coursera, LinkedIn, take classes at university, whatever it may be, get some of those technical skills, because regardless of your industry, they're going to be relevant. And then on the employer side, my advice would be the same thing. If you haven't thought about the importance of your digital presence, the importance of being able to digitally market or be available in some of these digital spaces, you need to prioritize that. And that's just the reality. And leverage these new grads that are coming in who are hungry and who want to put some of these new skills to use, because again, nothing lasts forever. This won't last forever. And so use this time to position yourself in a way to grow. Even though it seems a little counterintuitive, this is the great time to pivot.
My parting word would be for students, find lists, build a giant list of companies that you're just interested in what they do. Don't worry about if there's a position posted that fits your skill set or not. It's almost irrelevant. Go to Cranes, go to Built in Chicago, go to Chicago Inno, go to 1871, try to find 50 companies that just sound cool and just reach out to people, because I'm telling you, they will, it's like I mentioned before, there's that phenomenon where people who are experienced love to give advice and help people who are more junior, especially when they can tell they're go-getters and they're aggressive. But if you start with companies and places that you're actually interested in their mission and what they're doing, and just, contact people, the owners or the HR people or the heads of whatever department you're most interested in, and just try to network and ask them if they have any advice for how you can get your career started. You will get some good leads out of that, I promise you. So
yeah, and this isn't parting advice, I guess, but the last thing that I would say is we are still at DePaul in the Career Center super active. We're still putting on tons of programming. So if you're an employer out there, and you want to get involved in a virtual fair, we've got an interview day coming up. We have a ton of programming that will continue to push out over the summer and actively into the fall. So if you're looking for a conversation, looking for entry-level grads, we're here, we're available. Please reach out to us. That's quite literally what we're here for, help you build that strategy and get connected.
How can people find you? You want to plug your email address or something? Or
yeah, so you can reach out to me directly at acook49@depaul.edu. careercenter.depaul.edu is our homepage website. There's a lot of great resources for employers and students alike. Remote opportunities, who's hiring lists, all that good stuff.
Sounds good. Well, hey, thanks for stopping by. I'm going to read my outro text for the podcast here. Thanks for listening to Hirewell's Recruiting Insights podcast. If you like what you heard and want more insights from our recruiting experts, visit hirewell.com/recruiting-insights. I butcher it every time. And remember to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Adam Cook, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
Everyone stay safe and see you soon.
Bye-bye.